An original podcast from podlatino.com.
You close the metal doors, press a number on a lit panel, and within seconds you're on another floor. Maybe the 10th, maybe the 40th. The movement is smooth, almost imperceptible. No effort, no staircase. Nothing to remind you that less than 200 years ago, this was impossible. Not just difficult. Impossible for anyone unwilling to risk their life in the attempt. The elevator is one of those inventions that stopped existing as an invention. It's simply there, woven into buildings, into cities, into daily routine. Nobody notices it. Nobody thinks about it. But if you pause for a moment inside that box of metal and cables and pulleys and start pulling at the thread, what you find on the other end is a story that runs through centuries. Accidents, engineering, fear, steel, and the decision to build upward when the ground could no longer hold everything. To understand the elevator, you have to start long before it existed. Ancient civilizations already understood that moving heavy loads vertically was a problem worth solving. The Greeks used pulley systems in the construction of the Parthenon. The Romans installed similar mechanisms in the Colosseum to raise animals and gladiators from the underground cells up to the arena floor. These were not elevators, but the logic was the same. Apply force to overcome gravity in a controlled way. Over the centuries, those systems evolved slowly. In medieval palaces and castles, there were devices known as flying chairs, suspended platforms that moved with ropes and counterweights, designed for members of the nobility who didn't want to or couldn't climb stairs. King Louis XV of France had one at Versailles in the 18th century. It worked, in very basic terms, but it had one flaw that made it unacceptable for any broader use. If the rope broke, the platform fell. And when something falls from several meters up, the result is not something you recover from. That fear was real and well-founded. Every lifting system before the 19th century depended entirely on the integrity of a single rope or chain. If that rope failed, there was no backup plan. That meant these mechanisms could be used to raise goods, materials, cargo that could be replaced. But using them for people, at scale, in public buildings, was unthinkable. The risk simply was not acceptable. Then came Elisha Otis. And what's interesting about Otis is not that he invented the elevator. It's that he invented something far more specific and far more ingenious: the safety brake. It was 1852, and Otis was working at a factory in Yonkers, New York, designing a mechanism to move heavy machinery between floors. What he came up with was a spring-based system that, the moment tension in the cable was lost, activated automatically and locked the platform in place. It could not fall even if the rope was cut. The central problem had been solved. But inventions don't make their way into the world on their own. They need to be demonstrated. And Otis understood that perfectly. In 1854, at the World's Fair in New York, he set up an elevated platform in front of a crowd, rode it up himself, and once he was several meters in the air, ordered an assistant to cut the cable with an axe. The platform shuddered, the springs engaged, and it did not fall. The crowd held its breath and then burst into applause. It was theater, but theater with a precise point. If the rope is cut and you don't fall, the fear disappears. And without the fear, the elevator can be for everyone. 4 years later, in 1857, the first steam-powered passenger elevator was installed in the Hofwout Building in New York, a 5-story store on Broadway. It wasn't fast or quiet, but it worked, and it was safe. People could go up without risking their lives. It was the beginning of something that didn't yet have a name or a scale, but was about to change the shape of cities. The elevator alone, however, wasn't enough. To truly build upward, to raise structures of 20, 30, 50 floors, another ingredient was needed, one that was developing at the same time and in the same place: structural steel. Traditional masonry buildings made of brick and stone have a very clear physical limit. Their walls have to bear the weight of everything above them. The taller the building, the thicker the walls on the lower floors must be. There comes a point where the ground floor walls have to be so thick that almost no usable space remains. The Monadnock Building in Chicago, completed in 1891, and one of the last great masonry buildings in history, had walls nearly 2 meters thick at its base. That was the limit. Steel changed everything. With an interior metal structure absorbing the loads, the exterior walls became skin rather than skeleton. Columns and beams carried the weight, not the walls. That meant buildings could be taller, lighter, more open. And it meant that the elevator, which already existed, suddenly had an enormous purpose. If you can build 20 floors, you need a way to reach them. Chicago was the laboratory where all of this was first tested. After the Great Fire of 1871, which destroyed much of the city's downtown, builders had to reconstruct quickly and within a limited footprint. It was in that atmosphere of urgency and experimentation that what we now call the skyscraper was born. The Home Insurance Building, completed in 1885, is considered the first modern metal frame structure. 10 stories, steel and iron, and of course, elevators. The city began growing upward because it could no longer grow outward without losing time and money. The effect on urban life was immediate and profound. Before the elevator, the upper floors of a building were the least desirable. Climbing 4 or 5 flights of stairs was a real physical effort, repeated several times a day. That's why the lower floors were the most expensive and most sought after. The upper floors were for those with no other choice, for storage, for whatever nobody wanted too close to the street. The elevator reversed that logic entirely. Suddenly, being up high meant being away from the noise, the dust, the dampness of the street below. It meant views, quiet, light. The upper floors became the most desirable, and with that inversion came a shift in the economics of urban land, in the real estate market, in the way cities assigned value to space. The effects reached far beyond individual buildings. With the ability to build vertically, cities could concentrate more people and more activity into smaller footprints. That reshaped transportation patterns, urban planning, and the way businesses and offices organized themselves. The modern concept of the financial district, the corporate block, the skyline as a city's identity, none of it exists without the elevator. New York, Chicago, Hong Kong, Shanghai are not what they are without that mechanism moving up and down between floors. Today, elevators are everywhere. There are more than 1 million in operation in the United States alone. In Japan, there is technology capable of moving a cabin at over 70 kilometers per hour. Engineers are working on magnetic elevator systems that require no cables and can travel horizontally and vertically at the same time. The problem Otis solved with a safety spring in 1852 became a global industry that literally moves millions of people every day. But the most remarkable part isn't the technology. It's what that technology made possible without anyone fully planning for it. Nobody built the safety brake with the intention of transforming cities. Nobody designed the first skyscrapers thinking they would reshape real estate markets or define the visual identity of 20th century metropolises. Each piece fell into place alongside the others in a chain that no one consciously orchestrated. The fear of falling, the spring that resolved it, the steel that multiplied the possibilities, the urgency of Chicago, the economics of land that drove it all forward. The next time you step into an elevator and press that lit button, you'll know you're not simply using a machine. You're using the accumulated result of centuries of problems, solutions, accidents, and decisions that link together in ways no one entirely foresaw. That's what lies behind that box of metal and cables. That's what lies behind almost everything